Welcome back to Small Caps, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Kerry Stevenson and delighted to bring Keren Paterson back on to Small Caps. Keren is the Managing Director of Trigg, was mining, is now Trigg Minerals. ASX code is TMG. They have the Lake Throssell, Lake Yo projects over in Western Australia. And what Keren always says is building mines that communities can be proud of. And so today we are celebrating Global Fertilizer Day. Now, not only that, ladies and gentlemen, she doesn't know I know this, but it's also Keren Paterson's birthday. So hip hip hooray. Let's make sure we say happy birthday, Keren. I bought a little cake for you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
I need you to blow out the candle first. And then there's the cake. Let's give you the cake. There we go. Hope you enjoy it. Let's hope my smoke alarm doesn't go off now that you've blown out the candle. We'll just sort of put a lid on that one. Hope you're having a good day.
Thank you for baking me a cake. How amazing is that?
Oh, well, you know, we have to celebrate these things, but let's celebrate Global Fertilizer Day. Why do we even have one?
Well, if you think about the importance of fertilizer contributing to half of our food supply, it's actually a really important thing to be celebrating, because without that, we would not be able to feed all the people that we have in the world. So Global Fertilizer Day marks the day a patent for nitrogen fertilizer in 1908, the synthesis of nitrogen fertilizer, which really is the birth of modern agriculture and agricultural inputs. So it's also considered the green revolution in food production. So the innovation from that point is really very much why we can feed nearly 8 billion people on the planet today.
You don't really think about that, do you? There's all this talk about electric vehicles, but it's all well and good, ladies and gentlemen, driving an electric car, but if you can't feed yourself, it'd be a bit of an issue.
Yep.
And I think we do talk a lot about the lithiums and the minerals like that, but fertilizer is really key, isn't it? Do you think most people don't fully understand it? Because where we sit, do we import 100%?
We import a lot of fertilizer into Australia. In the potash space, we do import all of it still, and it is vital for plant growth. We cannot grow our food without some really essential core minerals: nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, sulfur, magnesium. They are all critically important, and some of them you might even have in a jar in your kitchen or in the bathroom because you take them as mineral supplements. And that is what food needs to grow, as well as our human bodies need that when we to eat in our food.
Okay, so on this Global Fertilizer Day, let's talk about Trigg Minerals. I'd like to know why the name change from Trigg Mining to Trigg Minerals. We haven't spoken about that.
Well, it's a good question, Kerry. And we, for a number of years now as Trigg and listed as Trigg Mining, we've been reflecting on what it is that we're doing out there. And yes, we'll be on a mining lease when we move in towards production, but there's no open pit or underground, there's no rock waste dump, and there's no tailing storage facility as such either. So there's such a sustainable aspect to this project because the minerals are already dissolved in brine, and we'll pump the brine out, use solar evaporation to crystallise it, and produce a very natural product that can be used potentially for organic farming as well, is just taking on board also a lot of feedback from our stakeholders. Our stakeholders said, mining is doing a bit of a disservice there because there is so much more to what it is that you're telling us about Lake Throssell. And our endowment there in the brine is electrolytes. These are all minerals that we need in the human body. There is sodium and chloride, our table salt, for potassium, magnesium, and sulphur are all important for our human nutrition. So we've broadened the scope, we've broadened the purpose, to building natural resource projects communities can be proud of, and we've changed the company name to Trigg Minerals to better reflect that.
Oh, that makes sense. I get that. But let me ask you another one. Why, and I don't fully understand this, but why can't you just, I don't know, put a sump down and pull up the brine and do it faster, in other words? What's the process? Why is there such a process towards this?
Well, just like agriculture, it takes time. So
Okay.
everything in the atmosphere, we're using the sun. It takes time to set the basis of those ponds. You've got to pump the water out, fill the ponds, and start that evaporation process. And we'll be evaporating a lot of water to get those salts to precipitate. So that the first round of the ponds can take about 18 months to get ready with that concentrated brine to go into the next part of the process, which then needs further evaporation before it goes into the purification plant.
All right. So where is Trigg Minerals at as I talk to you on the 13th of October, 2022?
We are working towards a pre-feasibility study. So the work that we're doing at the moment in the field, we've got some pictures in the background here. I love these pictures. I love being out there in that bright blue sky, but we are out there drilling, not quite with that rig, but another drill rig, getting ourselves ready to be able to put some test production bores into that basal aquifer. So last year we did some trenching, which took the superficial aquifer through to indicated resource. We're now looking at making sure that we've got enough data on the resource so that we can convert that to an ore reserve, and pumping is really important for that. Other work we have is looking at that broader endowment that we have in the brine, and that includes magnesium. So we're looking at, can we produce additional products in this project that are also needed for agriculture, but also other ways to enhance the revenue side, which has already been substantially enhanced with the price doubling in the last 12 months for sulphate of potash. But it's just making sure that we aren't wasting anything when it could be a revenue generating product.
How do you figure out what's in the brine? Because you just mentioned magnesium. I take my magnesium tablets. It's very good for you. And in fact, most people know that these days we don't get minerals from our fruit and vegetable. It's kind of been leached out, if you like. So we need to take supplements. But right now in Australia, we talked before about bringing it in from overseas. Where does it come from at the moment? Like, where's the most sulphate of potash coming from if it's not Australia?
China produces about 2/3 of the world's sulphate of potash.
Oh, wow. Okay. So what you're doing is you're saying, let's stop going and getting everything from China. We could do it here in our own backyard.
Yep.
So as somebody looking at what you're doing and the value proposition, do you see right now that you're making strides? I just want to see where you're going, where you're going from now. What's the process and what's the time frame for de-risking the project?
Yeah, so it is all about de-risking the process. We need to also keep in mind we made this discovery last year.
Yeah,
and and we have moved pretty fast to get to this point already, to have a scoping study and have done that last year as well, and moving forward to the PFS. But we're also making sure that we take some time, not too much time, but time to reflect on what has happened with two of the other projects that have been built and commissioned. There's been a lot of learnings that have come out of those two, to make sure that we are taking those lessons on board and having a look at ways that we can reduce the risk, reduce the uncertainty around that process. Because using the environment to do the work for us, it's fantastic. It's cheap energy because it's there. You don't have to turn it on. We've got a massive amount of evaporation rate in Western Australia. We anticipate about 3 metres a year on our project of water can be evaporated. So, but then there may be some other innovations that we can have a look at that can give us more certainty around the process, put it into more of a controlled environment, which can then also potentially also speed up that ramp-up phase as well. So we're just making sure that we really do understand this, because this isn't something that's been developed in Australia. This is a new industry in Australia, a new way of producing minerals to what we've ever done before. It's not new globally, but it is new in Australia.
Why is it new in Australia? You say it's not new globally, but it's new in Australia. Now,
Yep.
Australia is normally very good at sort of technology and innovation and doing things and spreading it out to the rest of the world. Why do we seem to be a little bit backward?
I think we've had such an endowment of particularly metals in rock that we've not really looked at it as minerals in brine being a potential resource. And these deposits are quite rare. So yes, there is other projects around the world, and some of them have been operating for many decades. but it's quite rare to discover these. So it is new, but it's a kind of a niche industry to do that from brine for potassium. Then we've also had this burgeoning new industry called lithium and lithium brines.
Yes, I was going to ask you about that.
Process. When we talk about evaporating the lithium brines to produce the metals for batteries, very, very similar.
If it's similar, and forgive me, I just don't understand fully, is there lithium in your brine, or is it a completely different water source? Brine source?
We don't have the source rocks for the lithium, so there is no lithium in our brine.
Okay, good. So we'll stay with the sulphate of potash.
Yep.
You talked about the lessons that have been learnt so far. Is that on the process side of things?
It's throughout the whole part of that, the supply chain of the mine site. So managing the bore fields, these are big bore fields with big production volumes. How do we go about that? How do we ensure that we keep up the pace of the evaporation rate during the summer months? That's incredibly important as well, to keep the process in equilibrium, and you're managing that equilibrium in the environment. So just making sure that we factor all of that into our studies going forward and look at ways to de-risk the project as much as we can.
All right. As I said before, I'm talking to you in the middle of October. What plans, what news, what's going on between now and, dare I say it, Christmas? I cannot believe I'm saying that, but it's not that far away. What are you doing between your birthday and Christmas?
We're doing evaporation trials in the lab on that process, so getting a really good grasp. We're calling it a bulk evaporation trial after our cypher one earlier in the year, and that will ultimately deliver early into 2023 sulphate of potash product that we can then talk to potential offtake partners with that, and they can do their tests on the product that we anticipate producing on that side of the flow sheet. We'll also, as we're drilling at the moment, we'll have results of that when the assay labs provide that information. So I don't know if it's going to happen by Christmas, but it will be happening shortly because we are drilling those holes and taking those samples right now.
How many holes are you drilling? How deep do you need to go? How difficult is it?
Well, it's not very deep. The deposit actually starts from just below our feet. In fact, I can show you with a photo. This gentleman that's digging a hole, just the bottom of that hole with a shovel is water. So that's where the deposit starts. And it goes down to around about 120 metres below their feet into the big paleo valley that we have that sits under that. And Lake Throssell is quite unique in that it's a very wide system. It's up to 6 kilometres wide, which then makes our footprint really quite condensed on the scale of these projects and makes it much more efficient on laying out the pipe work and everything for that.
When you start to pull out the brines, evaporate the water, does it have any sort of, because you talked about ESG before, you talked about being kind to the environment, does it have any impact, I guess, on the environment?
Well, there is impact, but being able to keep especially the halite crystallizer ponds on the lake means we can keep a lot of the salt system within the current salt system, and then taking the concentrated brine at this stage off lake into lined ponds, and then the process plant. So obviously that will be off lake and there will be some impact there. But overall, especially for the life of this mine, like we're talking initially at this stage on less than half our resource, a 21-year mine life.
That's just on Lake Throssell?
That's just Lake Throssell.
Is the focus just on Lake Throssell because you've got Lake Yeo as well, which we haven't spoken very much about? Are you just focused on Lake Throssell and getting that underway to start with?
Yes, Lake Throssell has some additional endowment that's really valuable, and that is there potentially will be a highway running right past our mine gate. So that Great Central Road is being upgraded and bitumised, and we're anticipating, based on the announcements of previous governments to say that they have fully funded that project, that by 2030 that will be a highway across the country, and it's within 5 kilometres of our deposit.
So from an economic viewpoint, that's a really big tick for you guys, is it?
Yeah, absolutely. It gives us a really good reliable logistics plan to export the product either into other areas of Australia or overseas. But given the scale of this project, we will be feeding many, many more people than what we have in Australia. So this is a global scale project, and we need to get it out. We need to get it to market.
Do you think it'll become a project of state significance, given it is sulphate of potash, it's important for the fertilizer industry, it's something Australia needs to get its hands on? Is the government being supportive?
I would like to think they could see the strategic benefit of this new industry for Australia, not just to diversify the mining industry, but to shore up our agricultural industry, because as you pointed out many times, Keri, we import so much of our fertilizer and rely on other countries in the world to supply that to us so that we can produce the food that we make here in Australia and feed the many millions of people that we do. But our supply chains globally have broken down so much. We really need to understand where we can get much more reliable sources of potash. And in the last 12 months, we've had sanctions against Belarus. We've had sanctions against Russia. We've had China restricting exports of fertilizers. That's affecting nearly half of the global potash market. And we need it. Like, we need potassium for our food. So we really do need to diversify our sources of potassium fertilizers. And in Australia, we've got fantastic deposits that can sustain agricultural industries for many decades to come.
And I think it's also important to mention that potentially doing this within Australia, your project and getting your project underway, will help the farmers from a cost point of view, I would have thought.
Well, first up, if they're buying it from somewhere else in the world, they've got to pay for all that shipping to get it to Australia. So having it here in Australia is going to have a positive impact.
Keren, what are the challenges that you see going forward with the project? Is it all smooth sailing, or are there some challenges ahead? I mean, let's open it up and go, all right, is it an easy process to get from here? I know that you've only been doing the project for just over a year. There's been a lot that's happened, but are there some challenges looking ahead?
There are always challenges with building a mining project. I think if anyone tells you there's no challenges, they really are dreaming.
Right.
There are so many things that you need to make sure that you address. The environmental approvals, all your stakeholders need to be on board with it. You need to fund it. You need to be able to build it. You need people to build it. And, we keep talking about needing people here in Australia. So we need to, there are definitely challenges ahead, but they're all, they're not insurmountable is what I'm trying to say, because there is a pathway forward to build this, and it's an important project and it's of scale. We're talking about a global top 10 project. We just need to keep working towards that, and it will get there.
I'll just mention it once more. Do you think the Australian government is aware of the importance of this particular sector to the Australian economy?
Not sufficiently. How
do we change that?
Well, I'm not sure how to change that, otherwise I would have changed it. So if anyone's listening and can help with that, I'm all ears, because as much as we hear about critical minerals being so much about batteries and wanting to establish a battery industry here in Australia, agriculture is vitally important to our sustainable future, and sustainable agriculture as well. And this is a project with a product that will increase the sustainability of agriculture. It doesn't introduce chloride to the soils, which has detrimental impact on those soils. We've got salinity here in Western Australia, where we've reported just recently that we're estimating that we're under-reporting that salinity. And why would we keep adding chloride to those soils and increasing that salinity when we have an alternative product, potentially, out of these brine deposits in Western Australia called sulphate of potash?
Is sulphate of potash just in Western Australia? I mean, I'm not sure whether you can answer this, but is it just in Western Australia? Is it specific to WA, because WA's got this huge landmass and these large fields?
I don't believe it's specifically in Western Australia. There's a couple of deposits that have been identified in the Northern Territory, but at this stage, I think it really is just those projects that are looking like they'll come into production are in Western Australia.
All right, Keren, we are running out of time on your birthday, and I better let you go so you can at least enjoy an evening out. Let's wrap it up with 3 reasons why you think our community should be sitting up and taking notice of Trigg Minerals right now.
Well, in the last 18 months, Trigg has announced a global scale discovery of sulphate of potash with a scoping study that has delivered results that indicate on less than half the resource. We have an initial mine life of 21 years. It is a low cost producer of sulphate of potash, which is incredibly important for sustainability of agriculture, and high grade as well. Sorry, I've probably said more than 3 points there, Keri. I get so excited about it. I just want to tell everybody everything.
Do you know what? I do love the fact that you are so passionate about this, and I hope that perhaps the Agriculture Minister is watching this and understands and can come out and give you a hand and maybe make it a project of state significance, because as I said right at the start, ladies and gentlemen, it's all well and good driving your electric car, but if you can't feed yourself, bit of a problem. And we should support projects like this which help our farming industry, because without mining and farming, what are we? Yeah. Keren, great to chat to you again on Small Caps. If I don't speak to you before Christmas, have a wonderful Christmas. It sounds like there's going to be a lot of news flow come January. So let's talk again in January.
Great. Thank you for your time, Keri, and thank you for my birthday cake.
Hope you enjoy it. Thanks for joining me on Small Caps.